Welcome to Master Military Life. Today I am talking to Megan Dickerson, who is
hmm
a 16-year Air Force military spouse, currently living in Ellsworth, who
hmm
has mastered the art of managing the mental load as a military spouse. Megan, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So, girl, give me an idea. You guys have been married and in the military for a very long time. Can you just give me an idea
Yes.
of how you guys met, when you got married, and where you all have been stationed in your career?
Yes. So we met in college. We actually went to two different colleges. We worked together at Cracker Barrel, of all places. And then I knew Matt was leaving. And so he went and started pilot training and ended up in Florida. A year later, we got engaged after doing long distance. And like 4 months later, we got married. And we waited to get married before I joined him. And so we lived outside of Pensacola in Whitingfield. He did half naval pilot training. And then Enid, Oklahoma for a few months. And then we've bounced back and forth between Dyess Air Force Base in Abilene and South Dakota is where the bulk of our career has been.
What
Mhm.
advice do you wish a seasoned spouse gave you when you were 20?
So when we did come to Ellsworth for the first time, I think initially the training bases are a little bit different, but when we first got into Ellsworth in the B1 community, there were a lot of seasoned spouses. And at that time, I think the spouse groups were very close knit because we relied on them to get through those longer deployments. And some of the advice like they gave me is just, lean on each other because we had each other. Then the other things, someone had told me was you don't realize like how perspective is in every household. It's slightly different. One of them, her advice was, think about like where you put things. And, we are always changing things, but when they leave for 6 months and they come back and your forks are in a different slot, it throws off everything. And so trying to keep consistency in your day-to-day life with everything, because, we always have that consistency, but they don't, it makes things smoother. And so that was probably the best advice up front because I like to move things around and I didn't think about that. So
It
day-to-day
gives you
routine.
something to do while he's away, like reorganizing or like
Yeah.
redecorating, but it
Always
kind
a
of
project.
creates a sense of kind
hmm
of being removed
Home.
when you, yeah,
Yeah.
that when you lose the sense of home when you come back to it and
hmm
everything is different. I never really considered that.
I didn't either. And you think about it and it made sense to me. I'm like, because you go back to your grandparents and like nothing ever changes. Like the smells, all of it are all the same. But, I guess in modern day, that's not normal. And so I would have never in 1,000 years thought about it. But they mentioned it, right up front. It was like, hey, try to keep everything as consistent as possible, not only for them, but for us. It's like, when they leave, we establish our day-to-day routine and that's what moves through.
When it comes to managing a household when your
Mhm.
spouse is away, what activities have you always been responsible for? Which ones do you share when you're home? Did you guys transition that between you two?
So when we first got married, I was still in college, and so I was taking college courses, and I was young. Like I said, I was 20, and so I was doing side jobs more so to give me like an identity and something to do when he was working and training these long hours. So I've always kind of took on like the finances and the cooking and things like that. When he leaves, I've always mowed and done like the yard work, but that's how I was raised. Like, it was me and my sister, and so if things needed to get done, you just did it. Like you didn't wait on someone to do it for you. But I think that a lot of that just comes from me and my personality. So when he is home, he does a little bit more of like, I don't want to say the traditional guy jobs, but like he will do a little bit more of like the heavy lifting. And I maintain doing the finances and whatnot. Over the years, Matt does now cook a lot more than I than I do because when he is home, he's home and very, very helpful. And so it takes a lot off of my plate now not having to think about what's for dinner 10 minutes before dinner because I'm not one to plan ahead. I can't do it.
What is the chore that you are like, when he steps foot in the door, I never do this?
Oh gosh, it's probably more the yard work, like the leaf cleanup and like that kind of stuff. Again, I don't mind helping, but it helps a lot that I don't have to. I would probably try to find someone to do that if I could now, just with having kids and timing. And we live on an acre, and so we have a little bit more land, and so it's a huge time suck. But otherwise, a lot of the remodel stuff, any of the guts of the house, I don't really want to touch that, and so I let him do it.
You said that you manage the finances largely. So, how do you do that before he leaves? Do you guys sit down, go through a budget? Do you talk about what he's going to spend and kind of map out if they're planning something while he's away to splurge? Like, how do you divvy that up to make sure you're both on the same page? Because I know this causes huge fights between a lot of military marriages.
It is, and I know everyone kind of has like their own method that works for them. Something we agreed upon, like when we first got married, we have a joint account. We don't do separate, and that's what works for us. I know a lot of people prefer having their own and they're separate in their household and whatnot. Several years ago, we decided we had our main account, but then we also have separate ones for budgeting because it's kind of like, in my mind, it's a Dave Ramsey system without cash. Because you can't do that now. I mean, you can, but it's not where it works. And so we kind of budget that way, and we budgeted for travel because that's always an additional expense being military and emergencies and things like that. So when it came time to spending, you don't feel as guilty if you're traveling if you have been planning for it. And our bills are always going to the other account for our bills and everything's being pulled from that. And honestly, I set up a lot of auto pays, but when it comes to like big purchases and spending over there, my husband, when he deploys, has always been a little frugal because especially if he was going somewhere where there wasn't a lot to do, he saw it as an opportunity to save for us to do something when he came home, like it'd be like a trip or whatever, because you usually try to do something fun to reintegrate in. But if there was a big purchase, like when they went to somewhere that they could do cool things, we discussed it like, hey, are you cool with this? I personally, as a spouse, like if he's there and he has the opportunity to do something cool, if we can make it happen, I want him to do it. Like you're not going to go willingly another time. And the likelihood of me going with you to enjoy it with you is very low. So I still rather him do it while he's there. Kind of the same thing as here. If you have an opportunity you can't pass up, you want to try to make it work. So, but we've just always been really open. But for the most part, it's not like a sit down talk about it. It's just kind of
Understanding.
an understanding. Yeah, this is how we're doing things. If it's anything over that, like, what are your thoughts? Is this okay? Can we do this? Do we have something else that's more important right now? And that's always gotten a little bit easier as we've gotten older. Income isn't as tight as it was when we were first
Yeah.
starting out, because that was a big difference coming from like me not working to working and us both providing. It's a
When did
big
that
difference.
transition happen? How many years in?
I did work, but it was like small jobs. I didn't start actually like career working until we moved back here permanently. More so when we first got married, I was finishing college. I thought I was going to be in nursing school. Did 3 years of nursing school and changed my mind. So, and then I went to school for business and worked in like the banking and loan processing here. And then we moved to Texas. And so I had our youngest daughter, or our oldest daughter now, then she was less than a year old. And so there I was just, trying to figure it out being a new mom for a while. Matt's schedule, he traveled a lot with tests, and so he was kind of back and forth between Abilene and the West Coast, working on projects and whatnot. And then I ended up working in their daycare for a little bit. So just like I said, odds and end jobs just to keep me busy, to give me identity outside of being mom, but still allowing me to be mom, because that's my main job. And then when we moved back here, I was actually talking to my broker now who helped me buy and sell my last house the last time we left here and then buy our house here about potentially getting into real estate. And he just said, hey, take these classes and whatnot. And it worked out because I knew Matt was leaving active duty and I needed a job that could remain flexible because at the time I didn't have any support here other than friends and we had kids. And so I guess about 4 years ago was when I truly started helping and contributing financially versus
Nice.
just the little savings for trips or whatever, which that does help, but
Yeah.
it's just more so the other jobs were to keep me busy. I wouldn't call them a career.
It's kind of like side hustle money, right? I mean, I feel
Yeah,
like that is.
absolutely.
I talk about this all the time with BCS Pay It Forward. And, we talk about, hiring military spouses to do VA work for
Hmm.
us. We talk about working with
Yes.
military spouse photographers. We talk about, using our military spouses and like the gift cards and how much we give. And I always talk about, some of our agents are become very successful through the program, which is amazing. And I'm like, look, I
Hmm.
want to remind you guys that like, if someone would have offered me $500 to do tours of neighborhoods in the area and
Hmm.
to like share reviews of restaurants in the group or something like that, or to follow up with incoming members and see how we can help them with their PCS a month. I was like, I never would have got my license. I would have just been happy to do that
Yes.
and been available to my kids and done that from my computer. And
Hmm.
I've never had any large aspirations of building what we've built by any means. It just was
No.
more of needing the side hustle money, needing something a little bit more than what we had to be able
Hmm.
to make sure that we weren't going to be racking up credit card debt. Because I don't know about you, I really struggled when we moved into our first home. Brad is deployed. I had Wesley at home with me. I
Hmm.
struggled with the building the budget. And I struggled with
Hmm.
the meal planning. I have ADD.
I think we all do.
It's like the math did not math, and no one teaches you those
Hmm.
systems, or at least my mom didn't. Like,
Hmm.
And so I struggled with that. And my whole thing was like, I just need to make more money. I am amazed and so impressed by the military spouses who come in. They're able to manage off one income. They're able to figure out their budget. They're able to figure out savings, the ends, and like use the commissary and use the next and like, use all these perks of
Mhm.
being a military spouse because like I really struggled to figure that out being early in.
I think so too, because like when I got married, like I was waitressing in college and was able to pay my bills and when I had an apartment and had a roommate and whatever. But then you get married and it's not like you're just getting by because you're not, it's more than just college. You have to actually plan. And so I think that was just a change that I didn't have the opportunity to figure it out myself. And so it was just both of us on that page and trying to figure that out. And so in the beginning, I will say Matt was a little more involved finances wise because he was the one who made money. Like it was what it was. Like I made like nothing. I think I worked at like Charlotte Russe or whatever, like way back when. One of those like mall stores.
Where you end up like buying more clothes than what you actually make. You're just like, oh, but that
Yeah,
sweater's cute. Well, that was 3 hours of my work.
yeah, that's really what it is. Like you have to like, kind of have the mindset of like, do I really need this? Like how long do I have to work to do this and whatnot? And then when we really truly sat down and got like an actual physical know where our money goes budget wasn't until we moved back down to Texas. And so it was our probably fourth move. It was a while. And it's not that we weren't financially fine. It was just trying to figure out like, hey, we have this much coming in. This much goes towards bills. This much goes towards here. And for me, it was by setting up, we had like 15 different checking accounts with our bank. And it wasn't that we actually used them, if you will, but I wanted to have like mini funds versus people that use Excel sheets because I'm such a visual person. I have to see it and not, like I said, I can't do cash. And so like weekly, I would go through and say, hey, we had this much on groceries. This is coming through here. These are our bills are all auto pay and things like that. And so it's a little more tedious once a week, but for me, that's what worked. And we were able to pay down and do like the snowball system for any school debts or anything like that back then. And so our time in Texas the second time, that really helped set us up, I think, for success moving back here. And then, when we sold our home, we sold it at the right time, and so that helped too. We weren't upside down on it or anything. So it really just took making an effort to sit down and look at it and say, this is what our plan is. We just got to do it. And it did help. So we weren't ever caught off guard.
Right. Wonderful. So let's talk about the other side of the mental load when you're active duty. You have kids, registering them for school, making sure they're doing fine in education, emergency
Hmm.
contacts, dentist, doctor's appointment. How did
Yeah.
you bring routine and structure around making sure that you're kind of managing your kids' lives along with everything else that comes with being an active duty spouse?
So we didn't have kids until we had been married for 6, 7 years. Like we kind of waited and more so I was in school. He was gone a lot. And so I was more like I had a lot of growing up to do. I think at that
Mhm.
point of like, living on your own, living across the country, I'd never really left the East Coast much before we got married. And so once we did have kids and, those first few years, I think you're just going with it. So I'm not naturally a homebody. Like I think I would want to be to an extent, but I've always been a very like a busy type person. Like we're never home. We're always out doing something and whatever. And so when we had our first daughter, my husband and I kind of had this mindset of like we're not going to stop living because we have kids. They come with us. And so when we would go out at that time, we would go rock climbing or go to breweries or whatever, she would come. Like it just, she just joined in and, obviously became a part of the family. We didn't necessarily, dynamic obviously changes, but we didn't try to make it change to an extreme that it made a big day-to-day difference. But now that they're a little bit older in school, I think that's something we're still navigating. When we first moved back here, my oldest was 3. And to be honest, that's probably a downfall on my part. I was not concerned with school systems. Like I didn't even think about it. It didn't cross my mind because I had this like tunnel vision. We were putting her in like they have a Montessori school here that's really, really good. And she did go there for preschool, but Jillian does need a little more structure and she does so well in the public school. Luckily, somehow by the grace of God, we did get in a very good area that we love. We love her teachers and the support they have. And so it's been a big help. I think they've changed a lot since we were in school a long time ago. But we've kind of found like for them, they need a little bit of routine as well. I think everyone kind of thrives on that. And whether you want to admit it or not, like you do well knowing at least day to day or day of the week what to expect. And so they know, we get up, we go to school, we do this, Saturdays are kind of like our free for all, but we just try to keep that consistency, keep the bedtime routine. We're not, they have to be at bed at this time, but we want to do the routine building up to it and things just to kind of maintain their, I guess, mental stability.
Yeah.
I mean, with our oldest being 9, we've been having a discussion a lot about it's some of it you're learning as you go. Like there's not a way around it. I mean, you have multiple kids and the older ones, like, she'll
My
ask,
poor oldest child.
oh my God. And I joked around with her. I'm like, honey, I'm like, work sometimes learning with you. So, because she's very intuitive and she picks up on things and she'll call you out on it. The other day, I told her, I'm like, honey, we're not going to do this if, the attitude doesn't stop or something. And she's like, well, you always say that. And I'm like, well, crap, like you called me out on it.
Does your husband take that inquisitiveness and intuitiveness
Mhm.
as disrespect?
I think honestly, I did that a little bit in the beginning. Like when she was younger, like you'd say, can you put your shoes away? Well, why? Well, because I don't want to trip over them. But, I was really bad about, well, just because we said so, just do it. And because part of me, I'm thinking, okay, it's common sense. Like you just put your shoes back or whatever it might be. And I don't know. I think just naturally, we all just expect it to be done as parents and we kind of hold some higher standards to our kids. And I think for us, it's more learning how they're thinking and how to communicate with them. So honestly, my husband's really good at understanding them. And I've something I've always said, because my oldest daughter and I, like, we're very much similar mindsets and like the way we think and how we think. And so I can almost like empathize with her and kind of understand where she's getting at. But when it comes to like, relating to them and calming them down and like figuring things out, he's more of that like problem solver. And I told him once, I'm like, I'm kind of envious that you can do that. And I don't know, they always say like the daddy's girls and the whatever, but he related it back to, well, I was an instructor. Like it's
Mm,
my job to realize that someone thinks differently and figure out how to flip it and for them to think about it from a different perspective. And so sometimes I think, with anyone, like you don't want to be told what to do or whatever it might be. But I don't know if you necessarily I think I was probably more of the, hey, like just do it because, I keep trying to explain to them like when things are messy, like our minds are messy and or whatever, like it's chaos. But then, when you have like that mindset and you thrive on organized chaos too, it's just, we're working on it, I think. But I was probably the bigger issue with that than he was. But I don't know if there's a reason why. But I can
so
see where you're coming from, the military wise. Like, this is an order, just do it. I mean, they're in a pretty heavy, like male dominated like industry, but like it's just, he can kind of just separate it. And I think just being, the mom getting emotional like quick I'll tell her like, hey, you have a short fuse. Then I like have to reality check myself. I'm like, well, I do too. So I need to, I think it's been parenting for us has been more of a reality check and learning to adapt and give them what we needed in the and so day-to-day life, like I said, having a routine for them,
Mhm.
getting them involved in the schools, getting them involved in sports or whatever, building those friendships. My husband grew up a brat and he moved a lot and he loved his childhood. But the only thing he said he wished he had was his senior year in the same school at least as his junior year. And I grew up where I went to kindergarten and senior year in some college with the same kids. And so just totally different aspects. And I think our girls are kind of getting a mix of like the best of both worlds of that. And so they are able to make friends and go to a little bit bigger of a school and, kind of find their own path in that aspect, but still maintain resilient. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Something you had mentioned is that when he comes back from a deployment, you try to do kind of a trip or something to
Mhm.
help ease the transition back in. Can you talk to me about what are some of the activities you guys have done?
I guess one of the last like bigger ones we did, we went to Hawaii and it was actually a family trip with Matt's parents and his sisters. They had actually planned it. But I think by planning something for us, for me, like myself, it gives me something to plan. It gives me something to do and to keep busy and to like research and focus on because and for him as well, because when we travel, I typically don't plan. I plan like what am I bringing? Not like this is where we're staying, this is the car we're getting, this is how we're getting there. That is like his area of expertise, and I will never do well doing that. I'm very like, I'm not spatially aware when it comes to traveling on like where we are here and whatnot and how close things are. But it just kind of gives you something to look forward to. Like, you are looking for them to coming home, but then it's just a way to just break up that you're home, now what? Like, like let's just go straight back to day until you were able to plan and do things and have that big, like exciting trip. Or, I mean, it could be something little, like even like just camping or whatever, but something that had to take some time put into it. And so
It's almost
I
like a
think it's
buffer space. It's like a
kind
buffer
of,
space to like rediscover your kids, your wife. I mean, all of us grow and
mhm.
change, right? The thing that
Yep.
makes us grow and change is our experiences. So you were just,
Hmm.
whether you're connecting, talking every single day, it's now
Yeah.
been 6 months where we haven't shared the same space, we haven't shared the same life. I have inside
Hmm.
jokes with my friends at home. You have inside jokes with your guys from the ship or the squadron or the
Hmm.
command, right? And so it's like we're kind of reintroducing ourselves. I think it creates that safe space like you were talking about versus coming home where things have maybe changed. It's like let's reconnect with each other and our family first, and then we'll
Hmm.
come back into our space.
Yeah, and so it's not immediate usually, but we usually had something on. We had something on the docket coming up. And so if it was, we were still moving towards something versus just
It's within
the
the first couple
mundane.
weeks of him coming back, I'm
Usually we
guessing.
try
Yeah.
to. Yeah. For me, like it's in Hawaii, I'm like, oh well, I'm gonna focus on going to the gym more. I'm gonna do this more, and we're gonna do this while we're there, and that kind of thing. It gave you, I guess I want to say, I mean, obviously you always have a reason, but it gave you just another reason to do things.
Well, there's gotta be light at the end of the tunnel. That's probably my biggest regret of our early on life is that like we should have made smaller, little memorable trips, like little local
Yeah.
Airbnbs or like somewhere we could drive within 3 hours to create memories with our family that didn't have the stress of like we're flying back east. If they cancel, we're out $2,000 that we could barely afford
Yeah.
anyway. And making sure that we were creating that space to make memories. I wish we would have done better about that.
That I can kind of relate to that because like in the beginning, Matt and I, like, so we got married, but he was in pilot training. And so the one thing they told you, like, welcome to pilot training, don't make any big life changes. Well, we got married. So we broke that rule right off the bat. And it was during like Christmas breaks. We got married on January 1st. And so honeymoon didn't happen. And then during pilot training, like, they don't want you to focus on anything else because that's your career and you have to be good at it in order to be safe. I think with any career, but you know what I mean. And then so we didn't get our honeymoon until after his, oh gosh, his second deployment. It was a bit. We went to St. Thomas, but before that that's what we did. We traveled home. And my sister was sick, and so I did travel a lot and then back that way. But there are those expenses, like we mentioned, like finances and whatnot with traveling, and whether you're driving or you're whatever it might be, and you're trying to maximize that time because they only do get so much time off. Hindsight, I do think compared to the rest of the world, the military is able to, when they're not busy, they do have, more than a week, which is nice. But it's you do go, you have this big trip and you want to make the best of it, and so you're there for a week or two, or you just opt not to see your family. And so for us, we always chose family because no one's promised tomorrow. But in the end, my parents have always been very vocal and saying, like, you need to do things. You need to make those memories for your kids. And 2 years ago, we actually stopped traveling for Christmas. And it was more so because for us, we were like, oh, well, it's easy. We'll travel. The rest of our family's here or whatever. But my oldest Ash, she's like, can we just stay home for Christmas? And I was like, that makes sense. Like you need to have those wake up in the morning and have that routine for them. And we didn't realize that was affecting her. And so
Mhm.
now we do make an effort to do things, whether it be one way or another, or if Matt's on a work trip, like meet him somewhere if we can, because he does go to Florida still for a little bit. We'll go down there. But you
Mhm.
have to be intentional. You have to make
Yeah.
you have to make time because again, like no one's promised tomorrow. It's obviously a little bit depending on the situation, it could be a little bit more dangerous in one field or another.
That's a true
Um,
statement.
yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your sister. So that's
Oh yeah.
obviously a very unique situation.
Mhm.
So can you give me just a brief synopsis? Was she sick before?
So my sister had cystic fibrosis, had multiple organ transplants. She was 4 years younger than me. And so kind of I don't remember her being like super sick my entire childhood, because I think as a kid we were just, we just did kid things. She did her normal treatments and whatnot, but for us that was normal outside of the occasional like refresh in the hospital to get her kind of jump started again, if you will.
Mhm.
But right after Matt and I got married, she had her first transplant. She had her lungs and her liver. And that lasted for a while. She went to college, had like her normal freshman year, joined a sorority. And then the week of finals, she went into chronic rejection. And so she ended up later having to have her lungs redone right after Jillian was born. And then she had a kidney too. So she's had several transplants. But because of that and because of like, like the gift from them, she had like almost an additional, like she almost doubled what her life would have been previously. But when it came down to everything, like she was very sick, obviously. It's not something that was curable. It was before medications were created to treat some of the heavier symptoms of cystic fibrosis. And she kind of made the decision, like her body was just getting so weak that she didn't want to do a ventilator anymore. And she ended up dying in 2023. She was 29. But something she did kind of protect us was just, made those decisions and said, this is what I want. And, it's not conversations you want to have, especially when you're 29. And, I found myself, I was kind of, internally, and I actually talked to her about it, so I guess not really internally. I was frustrated with her. I was more mad. I'm like, you're giving up. But then in reality, I'm like, thinking about it, and I talked to her about it later. She's like, yeah, I'm tired. Like I'm not. I've done this. And then looking at it, I'm like, she didn't like lose a battle or anything. Like she ultimately, we say like she won the battle. Like she got, ultimately what she wanted out of life and was content in her decision. But because of that, I think that's where a lot of my personality and skill sets come from. My parents they were high school sweethearts, and they had me young. And so I think I learned a little bit of resilience through them. But with Morgan being sick, it's not something I realized at the time, but we were more, you kind of had to roll with the punches. Like you could make plans, like you said, but then things could change in an instant. Like, someone can get a cold and they end up in the hospital and everything you had planned might not happen. We have had Christmases in the hospital. We had what we jokingly called like the Amazon Christmas because we had ordered everything. She ended up in the hospital, but no one got to wrap anything. So like, here, let's just open your Amazon box in the hotel. And so things like that. And so because just the uncertainty of just day to day, things can be going really well and they can turn on a dime. That's something that kind of built like a little bit of my character and how I am. And so like no one likes change, but you have to learn to adapt. And I try really hard not to say it is what it is. You just have to move forward because I think with anyone, and I am an anxious person and things get to me and whatever, that would make it a little bit harder. But when it comes to like that chaos, like in that moment, I'm able to like just separate and say, okay, this is what we need to do right now. We'll figure it out later, kind of thing. And so that helped a lot in like military life because, like I said, day to day, your schedules can be changing. We had one of Matt's last BTFs, second to last. One of the ones once he moved back up here, he was on standby. He was a backup, and we were literally ripping out drywall in our basement. And they got a call and said, "Hey, a plane diverted. You're leaving." And so he left and was gone for 2 months. But it was like within a few hours we knew about that, and we knew there was a chance, but the likelihood was kind of low. And so at that point, I had to just separate, okay, it is what it is. Like, what do you need? Let's just get you out the door and then we'll figure it out after the fact. And so I didn't have a bad childhood because of Morgan being sick. I never had anything where I felt like it was like less than, like I've heard people say that because I never felt like my parents did that. They were always one to make sure that Morgan and I were both treated equally and we both had the attention we needed. And I never, like I said, I never felt left out from anything. And I think honestly, her illness brought us closer, but it also built my character now. Looking back after everything, I'm okay. That's where a lot of who I am came from,
Mhm.
which set me up to be a military spouse. Because, like I said, I would have never, ever, like my entire time growing up, would have thought I would have been in South Dakota and married to someone that was in the military and still travels for work and having to do that.
But I think it focuses your energy and your attention on exactly what you were just saying was like the time that we do have, we make the most
Mm-hmm.
of every single minute.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we don't count on tomorrow. And gosh, if there is
Mm-hmm.
one tip for a new military spouse, I think that would be it. Is that not that because something horrific could happen, even though that does
Yeah.
happen, but also because you're right, they may get orders and they may be called away, but you have to have the mental stability to be okay to go with that flow. Otherwise, because the military life is gonna military, right? It's
It
gonna
is.
it's gonna run your schedule whether you like it or
Mm-hmm.
not. And so it's kind of surrendering your expectation of control really is
Mm-hmm.
what gives you the feeling of control.
And that's huge because all of us want that control and we want to be in control of the situation. And when you're not, you kind of feel helpless and you get stuck and you don't know what to do or where to go or who to relate to, which I think is why it is so hard to connect to people when you do move, unless you have that built-in community. And like I'd mentioned, our community within the B1 was wonderful. The squadrons we were in, like they were very close knit, but that was what was going on at that time. And I think they still do hang out and do things. So I did have people to rely on.
Mhm.
but I still had to take it upon myself to make that effort to get out to do things. I think one of my biggest frustrations, and this is, maybe just me, is when you see the spouses groups and they say, "Hey, don't go here. It's terrible. It's a terrible base. You'll hate it. I'm miserable. We're isolated," or whatever it might be. Because I think every situation is so different, and you get what you make of it, like what you put out of it. We went to Texas and I have friends that love Texas and that's wonderful. It is not my preferred place to live. We like being outside, we like hiking, we like doing things, and there are things to do there. It's just different than what we prefer to do. And, looking back, that's the only place I was like truly upset that we were going back to. And it was just more so because I liked my life here and I got, established here and I enjoyed it here. We were here for 5, 6 years before we moved back. But looking back, why we were there, I don't have any bitter memories. Going there, I was kind of like a little bit bitter and a little bit upset, but I knew Matt was getting the job he wanted. So we just kind of went with it. And, the military's going to move you. It is what it is. At least he kind of had a control of, applying for the job and getting the job he wanted. But, we made the best of it while we were there. They had a zoo, they had things to do. We just made sure we were taking advantage of that and doing that and trying to find things within that area that we could enjoy. Annual zoo passes in Abilene were awesome. We would go for a couple hours with little kids and then go to nap. Or we
Mhm.
spent a lot of time at the mall playground or the library or there's always something you can do. It's just different than what we did here. And so, like I said, it wasn't bad.
I think that's a powerful reflection though, right? Is it like
Yeah.
sometimes, especially with social media, we get these really powerful message of like this is good and this is bad because quite frankly,
Hmm.
that's the crap that goes viral.
Yeah.
But the reality is like someone's least favorite base is someone's favorite base. And so I guess
Yep.
to the military spouse out there who's like trying to choose where they want their first orders to be and come up with your first
Yes.
billet and put those five down, like don't rely on other people's experiences. Like ask
Mm-mm.
yourself, like, what do you enjoy to do? What do your
Yep.
family enjoy to do? And jump into some of our PCS pay it forward groups to learn more about the areas before
Absolutely.
you even get assigned to them, right? And so you
Yes.
can kind of set yourself up for success versus riding the coattails of someone else's experience that maybe wasn't made to serve you. There is a
Yep.
base out there for everyone. Sports
Hmm.
may not be for everyone, but it's perfect for you. So
Yes, we do love it.
well, thank you so much for
Yes,
joining
thank
us
you.
today. I hope that a military spouse listens to this. It brings them comfort, gives them a sense
Hmm.
of control and resilience, really helps them kind of come up with some game plan to manage the mental load as they navigate their way through the military.
Thank you.